11 secretaries failed to last 1 week with Baltimore's most feared Mafia boss. Then a curvy temp walked into his office, looked him in the eye, and refused to be intimidated. Hannah Reed was not looking for danger. She was looking for a paycheck. Her father was waiting for heart surgery, unpaid bills covered her kitchen table, and another rejection could cost them everything. So when Harbor Crown Logistics offered twice the normal salary, she ignored the guarded elevators, the frightened employees, and the warning hidden inside her predecessor's unfinished resignation letter. But this is not simply a story about a woman falling for a dangerous man. It is about what happens when someone underestimated learns that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to keep moving while fear is standing beside you. Stay until the end, like the video, and comment where you are watching from. Courage did not begin for Hannah Reed with a gun pressed against her head. It began with a hospital bill folded inside her purse and a promise she could no longer afford to keep. 6 weeks before the warehouse, Hannah sat beside her father in room 814 at St. Catherine Cardiac Center, listening to a machine count every fragile beat of his heart. Rain pressed against the window in thin silver lines. Beyond the glass, Baltimore looked washed of color. The harbor cranes stood motionless beneath a low gray sky, and the streets below shone beneath the cold November rain. Walter Reed slept with one hand resting above the blanket. His fingers were rough and scarred from 30 years of electrical work at the docks. Even unconscious, he looked stubborn. Hannah had inherited that from him. The billing coordinator sat across from her with a sympathetic expression and a folder resting on her lap. The insurance company approved the procedure, the woman said quietly. But there are portions of the hospital stay rehabilitation and specialist fees they will not cover. Hannah looked at the number printed at the bottom of the page. For a moment, the room seemed to tilt. She read it again, hoping she had misplaced a decimal point. She had not. That includes the deposit. That is only the estimated deposit. Hannah kept her face still. She had become good at that during the past year. She could read numbers that frightened her, receive calls she did not want, and hear doctors use careful words without letting her expression change. Inside, something tightened until breathing hurt. When is it due? Before the procedure can be scheduled. Hannah folded the paper once, then again. The billing coordinator lowered her voice. There are payment programs. I can bring you the applications. Please do. The woman rose and left the room. Hannah stayed in the chair, staring at the square of paper in her hands. Her checking account held $213. Her rent was due in 8 days. The agency had not called with a new assignment since Monday. She closed her eyes. 5 years earlier, she had graduated with a business administration degree and a plan. She had imagined glass offices, serious meetings, and a career built through discipline. Instead, she had spent years answering phones for people who forgot her name, filing papers no one read, and smiling through interviews where managers looked at her body before they looked at her resume. Walter stirred. You are making that face again. Hannah opened her eyes. What face? The one where you decide the whole world is your responsibility. His voice was weak, but the humor in it remained. She slipped the bill into her purse. You were supposed to be sleeping. I was until someone started worrying loud enough to wake the dead. You are not dead. Not for lack of paperwork trying to convince me. Hannah reached for the water cup and held the straw near his mouth. He drank, then settled back against the pillow. How bad is it? The weather. The bill. She looked toward the window. Manageable. Walter gave her the same look he had used when she was 16 and had lied about scratching his truck. Hannah, I said I will handle it. You have been handling everything since your mother died. That was a long time ago. That does not make it your job. She straightened the blanket around him. You raised me. That makes you my responsibility. Walter caught her hand before she could pull away. His grip was weak, but his eyes were clear. I raised you to have a life, not to spend it paying for mine. Her throat tightened. You can give me that speech after the surgery. You always did hate losing an argument. I learned from you." Her phone vibrated inside her purse. Hannah glanced at the screen. The temporary employment agency. She stepped into the hallway before answering. "This is Hannah." A woman named Elise spoke quickly on the other end. "We have an executive assistant opening, immediate placement. Downtown Baltimore. The client asked for someone experienced, discreet, and available today. What is the company Harbor Crown Logistics?" Hannah knew the name. Anyone who had lived near the port knew it. Harbor Crown owned freight terminals, warehouses, and shipping contracts throughout Maryland. "How long is the assignment?" The client did not specify. That usually means someone quit. A pause followed. "Elise, the position has experienced some turnover. How much turnover?" "The rate is $48 an hour." Hannah stopped walking. That was more than double what the agency usually offered her. "When can I start today, if possible? When is the first check Friday?" Hannah looked through the glass door at her father. He had closed his eyes again. "I will be there in 90 minutes. Harbor Crown Logistics occupied the upper floors of a tower overlooking the inner harbor. The building rose from the wet streets in dark glass and steel, its windows reflecting the gray water below. Men in tailored coats moved through the lobby with phones pressed to their ears. Women in polished shoes crossed the marble floor without looking up. Hannah entered wearing the best clothes she owned: a navy blouse, black trousers, a charcoal coat purchased 3 winters earlier from a clearance rack. Her resume rested inside a leather folder that had begun peeling at the corners. The guard behind the security desk watched her approach. "Name, Hannah Reed. I am here from Prescott Staffing." He did not smile. He asked for her identification, entered the information into his computer, then looked at the screen longer than necessary. "Wait here." He lifted a phone and turned slightly away. Hannah could not hear every word, only fragments. "She is here." "Yes." "No, sir." The guard hung up and took her photograph with a small camera mounted beside the desk. What was that for building security? "Do all visitors get photographed?" His expression did not change. "Executive floor visitors do." He handed her a temporary badge. 46th floor. Someone will meet you." The elevator doors closed around her. As the numbers climbed, Hannah studied her reflection in the mirrored wall. Her dark brown hair had already begun to curl from the rain. She smoothed it behind one ear and adjusted the folder beneath her arm. The salary was enough to cover the hospital deposit if the assignment lasted 3 weeks. 2 weeks would cover half. 1 week would buy time. The elevator opened into silence. The executive floor smelled of polished wood, expensive coffee, and something colder beneath both. Fear had a scent Hannah would later decide. It smelled like a room where everyone spoke softly even when the doors were closed. A woman in a cream blouse hurried toward her. She appeared to be in her mid-40s with sharp features and eyes that never rested in one place for long. "Hannah Reed." "Yes, I am Diane Cole. Office Administration." They shook hands. Diane's palm was cold. She looked Hannah over, not rudely but carefully, as if measuring whether she could carry something heavy. "You understand this is a temporary assignment. I have worked temporary positions before. Not like this one." Diane turned and walked down a long corridor. Hannah followed. 2 men stood outside a pair of frosted glass doors. Both wore dark suits. Neither wore a visible company badge. One was broad through the shoulders, with pale eyes and a scar near his jaw. The other was younger, with close-cropped hair and the calm posture of someone who noticed every movement in the hallway. They watched Hannah pass. She lowered her voice. Corporate security Diane kept walking. Something like that. They reached an outer office. The room looked as though a storm had passed through it. Folders covered the floor beside an overflowing cabinet. Coffee rings stained the desk. 3 stacks of mail leaned against a dead plant. A telephone blinked with 14 missed calls. A cracked computer monitor displayed a calendar filled with red warning boxes. A resignation letter remained in the printer tray. Hannah picked it up. The first line read, "Mr. Moretti, no amount of money is worth being treated this way." The rest of the page was blank. Diane removed it from her hand. "You will not need that. How many people have sat at this desk?" Diane looked toward the frosted doors. 11 since September. Hannah glanced at the date on the calendar. It was November 17th. 11 assistants in 11 weeks. Yes. What happened to them? 1 cried before lunch. 3 walked out. 2 were fired. 1 locked herself in the restroom. That accounts for 7. Diane's fingers tightened around the unfinished letter. "You do not need to know about the others." Hannah looked at the abandoned desk again. "Does Mr. Moretti throw furniture? No. Does he touch his employees? No. Does he pay on time?" Diane blinked. "Yes. Then I have worked for worse." 1 corner of Diane's mouth moved, almost becoming a smile. It disappeared when the inner office door opened. Julian Moretti stood in the doorway. Hannah had expected an older man. The name Moretti carried the weight of an established company, the kind inherited through generations. She had imagined silver hair and a soft stomach hidden beneath an expensive vest. Julian looked no older than 36. He was tall, lean, and perfectly still. His dark suit fit as if it had been made around him. His hair was nearly black, his face clean-shaven, his expression unreadable. A faint scar crossed one eyebrow. He did not offer his hand. "You are the new one." "Hannah Reed." "I did not ask." He dropped a thick folder onto the desk. "My schedule is wrong." Hannah opened it. The first page contained 4 overlapping appointments. She turned to the second page, then the third. "It is more than wrong." The younger guard near the door looked at her. Julian's gaze sharpened. "Excuse me. You have 2 meetings scheduled in different buildings at 9:30 tomorrow. Your attorney is arriving during a board call. Someone booked a dinner on Christmas Day. You have a meeting in Annapolis ending 12 minutes before another one begins here." She looked up. "Unless Harbor Crown owns a helicopter, you cannot make both." Julian crossed his arms. "Fix it. I will need access to your calendar, contact list, travel schedule, and assistant notes. You have the folder. The folder is a record of mistakes. It is not a system." Diane stared at the floor. The older guard watched Julian carefully. Julian stepped closer to the desk. Most people would have moved back. Hannah remained where she was. "You have been here 3 minutes. 4. And you have already decided my office has no system." I decided that before I reached the second page. A silence opened between them. Julian's face revealed nothing, but something changed in his eyes. Not amusement. Interest. He turned toward the younger guard. "Mason, give her access." The guard approached and handed Hannah a card. "Do not open anything marked private." Hannah took it. That would have been useful information before I opened the folder. Mason looked at Julian. Julian said, "Let her work." For the next 3 hours, Julian offered no help. Hannah suspected that was deliberate. She called attorneys, port officials, contractors, and board members. She discovered 3 separate calendars maintained by previous assistants, none of which matched. One used colors, another used symbols. A third contained notes written in abbreviations no one understood. Hannah created a new master calendar. She verified every address. She added travel time. She ranked calls by urgency. She discovered that Julian's mother had been scheduled twice and erased both times. At noon, Mason placed a sandwich on her desk. "I did not order this. Mr. Moretti did." Hannah looked through the glass wall. Julian stood near his window speaking into a phone. "Does he order lunch for all his assistants? No. Did the others forget to eat?" Mason's expression remained blank. The others usually left before noon. Hannah unwrapped the sandwich. Then they missed a good lunch. At 1:15, Julian sent her a note instructing her to move a harbor meeting from 1 to 3. At 1:20, Mason appeared and told her Julian wanted the meeting kept at 1. Hannah checked both instructions, then walked into the inner office. Julian was reading a contract behind a wide mahogany desk. She placed the 2 messages in front of him. "You told me to move the harbor meeting to 3. "Yes. Then you told Mason to keep it at 1. "Maybe I changed my mind. Then communicate like an adult." Mason stood near the door. His face did not move, but his attention sharpened. Julian slowly lifted his eyes. The air in the office seemed to narrow. "Do you always speak to employers that way? Only the ones creating problems they expect me to solve?" Julian rose. He did it without hurry. That made the movement more intimidating. Hannah felt her pulse quicken, but she refused to lower her gaze. He came around the desk and stopped a few feet from her. "What makes you think you know what I expect? You hired an assistant, not a mind reader." His jaw tightened. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Julian returned to his chair. "Keep it at 3. Hannah picked up the messages. "Good." She turned toward the door. "Hannah." She looked back. He held her gaze. "Do not mistake permission for weakness." She considered him for a moment. "Do not mistake cooperation for obedience." Mason opened the door for her. As Hannah returned to her desk, she heard him ask Julian quietly, "Do you want me to call the agency?" Julian answered after a pause, "No." By 4 o'clock, the office had become more tense. A freight vessel had been delayed outside the port. A customs inspection had stopped 2 containers. 3 men arrived without appointments and waited in separate conference rooms. Julian moved between calls with increasing irritation. At 4:20, a man entered the office without knocking. He spoke rapidly in Italian. Hannah understood only a few words. "Container, police, Santoro." Julian's expression changed. The anger disappeared. Something much colder replaced it. He answered in the same language, his voice low. The man left. Julian called through the open door. "Why is Patterson still downstairs?" Hannah checked the calendar. "Because you told me not to interrupt the meeting. I told you he was important. You told me everyone was important." Julian stepped into the outer office. "I should not have to repeat myself. You repeat yourself constantly, usually after changing the instruction." Diane, standing near the copy machine, froze. Julian placed one palm flat against Hannah's desk. "Do not argue with me." His voice rose enough to make the entire floor go silent. Hannah's heart struck hard against her ribs. She could feel Diane watching. Mason had moved closer. The old instinct told Hannah to apologize, lower her head, and preserve the paycheck. Then she thought of Walter in the hospital. She thought of the bill in her purse. She thought of 11 women leaving this desk and allowing a difficult man to believe fear was the same thing as authority. Hannah set down her pen. "You can shout at me," she said, "or you can let me fix your 4 o'clock meeting." Julian stared at her. She kept her voice level. "Pick one." No one moved. Rain tapped against the glass. Julian's hand remained on the desk. For one long moment, Hannah wondered whether she had just lost the highest-paying job she had ever been offered. Then he straightened. "Fix the meeting." She picked up her pen. "Good choice." Diane turned away so quickly that Hannah almost missed the smile on her face. At 6:30, the executive floor had emptied. Hannah completed the new schedule, printed 2 copies, and placed one on Julian's desk. Each appointment was confirmed. Every address included parking instructions. Travel time was marked in blue. Security concerns were marked in red. At the bottom, she added a handwritten note. "Your mother's birthday dinner was missing." I added it. "Do not reschedule unless you enjoy disappointing Italian mothers." Julian was on the phone when she entered. He glanced at the pages. "You are leaving. It is dark outside and I have been here since 10. I work later. I am sure the building will survive without me." He covered the phone. "Be here at 8. Hannah put on her coat. "My contract says 9. It says executive support. It also says 9. Julian looked at her. She looked back. 9, he said. Hannah nodded. "Good night, Mr. Moretti." She reached the door. "Hannah." She turned. His gaze shifted toward the schedule. "The meeting with my mother stays." For the first time that day, she smiled at him. "I know." After she left, Julian ended his call and picked up the schedule. Mason stood in the doorway. "Should I contact Prescott Staffing?" Julian read Hannah's handwritten note again. "No. You said the same thing at lunch, and I am saying it again." Mason looked toward the empty desk. "She challenged you in front of the entire floor." She corrected me. "That usually makes you angry." It did. But she is coming back. Julian folded the note and slipped it into the inside pocket of his jacket. She finished the schedule. Hannah took the service elevator to the parking garage. The underground level was colder than the lobby, filled with the smell of concrete rain and engine oil. Her shoes echoed between the rows of cars. As she approached the exit, she heard 2 men speaking behind a support column. She made it through the day. A second man laughed quietly. "Give her until Friday. What if she starts noticing things? Then she leaves like the others." Hannah slowed. The first voice dropped lower. "And if she does not want to leave a car door slammed? Everyone leaves." Footsteps moved away. Hannah remained still until the garage fell silent again. She told herself they were discussing confidential business. A company like Harbor Crown handled valuable freight government contracts and private shipping routes. Security would be strict. Employees would be cautious. There were reasonable explanations for men without badges, locked files, whispered conversations, and a chief executive who reacted to one name as if it had drawn blood. She repeated those explanations as she walked toward the street. The rain had weakened to a fine mist. Across the road, a black sedan idled beneath a broken streetlight. Hannah reached into her purse for her keys. Inside the sedan, a man raised a camera. The lens caught the light. Hannah stopped. For 1 second, she and the man behind the camera stared directly at each other. Then the sedan pulled away from the curb and disappeared into the wet Baltimore traffic. Hannah stood alone beneath the tower, her keys clenched between her fingers. Above her, on the 46th floor, Julian Moretti remained beside the window. He watched the same black sedan turn toward the harbor. The note Hannah had written rested inside his jacket. His expression hardened. "Mason," he said into the phone. "Find out who followed my secretary." The black sedan disappeared into the rain, but Julian remained at the window long after its taillights vanished. Below him, Hannah crossed toward the parking garage with her keys clenched between her fingers. She did not know he was watching. Mason answered on the second ring. "Find out who followed my secretary." There was a pause. "Your secretary." Julian's gaze stayed on the street. "Do not make me repeat myself." By 9 the next morning, Mason had no name. The sedan had false plates. The driver had avoided every camera near the harbor. Whoever photographed Hannah knew where Harbor Crown's surveillance ended and city coverage began. "She noticed them," Mason said. "I know. You could tell her." Julian looked through the glass wall. Hannah sat at her desk with a pencil between her teeth rebuilding a month of appointments from 3 damaged calendars. She looked ordinary in a place built on secrets. That was the problem. No, increase security around her apartment. If she sees them, she will ask questions, then make sure she does not see them. Mason left with an expression that suggested hiding anything from Hannah Reed would soon become expensive. 10 minutes later, Hannah entered with a stack of files. "You missed breakfast?" Julian looked at the coffee beside him. "This is breakfast. That is caffeine in a cup. It has kept me alive for years. So has stubbornness. Neither counts as nutrition." She placed a wrapped bagel beside his hand. "Did I ask you to monitor my eating habits? No. You also did not ask me to correct your mother's birthday, but she called to thank me." His eyes narrowed. "You spoke to my mother." "She spoke to me. There is a difference." "What did she say?" "That you forget to eat when you are angry." "I am not angry." Hannah glanced at the untouched files on his desk. "Then your paperwork must have offended you personally." Julian almost smiled. The movement was so slight she thought she had imagined it. A week passed. Then another. The 11th assistant had left before completing 3 days. Hannah entered her 3rd week without mentioning the record. The office changed around her. Meetings began on time. Contracts stopped disappearing beneath old invoices. Diane no longer entered the executive suite with apologies trembling behind her teeth. Mason began asking Hannah where Julian was supposed to be instead of checking the calendar himself. Even the guards learned that when Hannah said Julian could not be disturbed, the answer was no. One Tuesday, a harbor contractor arrived 40 minutes early and demanded immediate access. "He knows me," the man said. "I am sure he does. He will want to see me. He is in a private meeting." The contractor leaned over her desk. "You do not understand who I am." Hannah looked up from her screen. "You are a man without an appointment blocking my light." Mason turned away. "Tell Moretti that Frank Delaney is here. I already did." And he said no. Frank stared at her. "You told him my name?" "Yes." And he still said no. Hannah returned to her keyboard. "Now we both understand who you are." After Frank left, Julian opened his door. "You enjoyed that?" "A little. He controls half the private loading crews on the south side. Then he should understand schedules." Julian rested one shoulder against the frame and watched her. The first week his presence had tightened every muscle in her body. By the 3rd she knew the shapes of his silences. There was the silence that warned someone to stop speaking. The silence that meant he was calculating. The silence that appeared when he wanted to laugh, but had forgotten how. This one was different. What she asked? Nothing. That is rarely true. He returned to his office without answering. Later that afternoon, Hannah opened an archive box and found a freight manifest for industrial water pumps. The declared weight was wrong by several thousand pounds. She checked the container number. The same number appeared on another manifest dated 9 days later listed as imported tile, while the first container was still recorded at sea. The insurance value made no sense for either cargo. Hannah carried the file into Julian's office. He was speaking with Raymond Moretti, a silver-haired man she had seen twice but never met. Raymond stopped talking when she entered. "What is it?" Julian asked. "This manifest is wrong. Leave it on the desk. The weight does not match the cargo. The container number is duplicated and the insurance value makes no sense." Julian closed the folder without opening it. "Put it back. The records could trigger an audit." "They will not. You cannot know that. I know more about my company than you do." "Then explain the numbers." Raymond watched them with growing interest. Julian's voice cooled. "They do not need to work for you. They pass through my system. Not anymore." Hannah held his gaze. She had seen anger from him. This was not anger. It was fear under perfect control. What is Harbor Crown actually moving? The room became still. Julian rose slowly. Ask me that again, and this assignment ends. Hannah placed the folder on his desk. Then correct the mistake before someone less loyal notices it. She walked out. Raymond waited until the door closed. Loyal Julian looked at the folder. She uses words carelessly. No, Raymond said. She uses them very carefully. The following morning, Hannah's phone rang during a meeting. She saw the hospital number and answered. A nurse spoke calmly, which frightened her more than panic would have. Walter had experienced chest pain. His blood pressure had dropped. The doctor wanted the family present. The room blurred at the edges. Julian stopped speaking. Hannah. She rose too quickly and struck the table with her knee. I need to go. What happened? My father. Julian looked at Mason. Bring the car. I can drive. You are shaking. I am not. You dropped your phone. She looked down. Her phone lay on the carpet. Julian picked it up and placed it in her hand. You can argue in the car. The ride to St. Catherine took 12 minutes. Julian made it in 8. At the hospital, he waited while doctors examined Walter. He postponed meetings with short calls and returned Hannah's coffee twice after it went cold. When the cardiologist emerged, Hannah stood so fast the chair scraped the floor. Walter was stable, but the procedure could no longer be delayed. Relief and terror arrived together. Inside the room, Walter looked smaller than he had that morning. He saw Julian through the glass. Your boss? Yes. He always looked like he's waiting to bury someone only on weekdays. A weak smile touched Walter's mouth. He came with you. He insisted. Men do not insist on hospital waiting rooms unless they care or feel guilty. Julian feels guilty about everything. He expresses it as anger. Walter's smile deepened. You call him Julian. Hannah stood. I should check the paperwork. Outside, Julian ended a call. The specialist will see him tomorrow. What specialist? Dr. Elaine Porter. Hannah knew the name. Porter was one of the best cardiac surgeons in Maryland. She has a waiting list. Not anymore. A cold feeling replaced Hannah's gratitude. What did you do? I made a call. I did not ask you to. I know. You cannot arrange my father's care without speaking to me. He needs the procedure, and I need to know what favors I am accepting. It is not a favor. Then what is it? Julian looked through the glass at Walter. You make sure nothing falls apart for me. That is my job. No. His voice softened. It stopped being just your job 2 weeks ago. The corridor seemed too narrow. I do not accept debts I cannot repay. You owe me nothing. Men like you do not do things for nothing. Something dark moved behind his eyes. Men like me. Powerful men who believe a phone call makes every problem disappear. Your father's problem is not disappearing. I know that. Her voice cracked. Julian did not touch her. That restraint affected her more than comfort would have. I cannot fix this, he said, but I can make sure he has the best chance. Hannah looked toward her father. I will accept the appointment, but I will repay every cost. No. Then cancel it. His mouth tightened. You negotiate like a criminal. You negotiate like a dictator. They stared at each other. We will discuss repayment later, Julian said. It was not agreement, but for that night it was enough. Across the city, Victor Santoro spread 4 photographs across his desk. Hannah entering Harbor Crown, Hannah leaving the hospital, Mason outside her apartment, Julian waiting beyond the glass wall of Walter's room. Tommy Vescari stood opposite him. She is a temporary assistant. 11 came before her, Victor said. Moretti did not follow any of them to a hospital. You think he is in love? Love takes time. Victor touched the photograph of Julian. Attachment is faster. He slid the picture toward Tommy. Learn her routine, where she sleeps, where her father is treated, who she calls when she is frightened. And then Victor lifted his whiskey. Then we discover how much of Julian Moretti is hidden inside that office. That same night, Hannah sat at her kitchen table with Walter's hospital estimate beside her laptop. She compared public shipping notices with the dates copied from Harbor Crown's calendar. Every rerouted container produced the same sequence. A schedule changed. Chesapeake Risk Solutions submitted an invoice. Customs appeared at the original location instead of the new one. Someone was being paid for information that should never have left Julian's office. Hannah saved the pattern to an encrypted drive and placed it inside an old coffee tin above her refrigerator. She told herself she was protecting the company. The truth was harder to admit. She was trying to discover whether the man who had helped her father was dangerous or merely surrounded by danger. The first snowstorm of winter arrived during Hannah's 4th week. By 7, the harbor had vanished behind white wind. Public transportation stopped. Bridges closed. Most employees left before the roads became impassable. Hannah remained because Julian was still in a meeting. When he emerged, he found her at the conference table surrounded by invoices. You are still here. You are observant. The roads are closed. I noticed the snow. You cannot drive home. I noticed that too. Julian removed his jacket and loosened his tie. Without the armor of his suit, he looked younger and more tired. What are those contractor invoices? I did not ask you to review them. You asked why the port schedules keep changing. That is not the same thing. It became the same thing around invoice 14. She held up a page. Chesapeake Risk Solutions bills Harbor Crown every time a high-value route changes. Julian's face emptied of expression. They provide marine security. Their registered office is an empty storefront. You checked I made a call. Hannah, you need to stop looking into this. Then stop putting it on my desk. The building lights flickered. For 1 second, the floor went dark. Julian moved before the emergency lights appeared. His hand closed around Hannah's wrist. He pulled her behind him and reached beneath his shirt. A cold shape pressed against his side. A weapon. Red emergency light filled the room. Hannah looked at his hand around her wrist, then at the outline beneath his shirt. Julian released her. Neither spoke. When the normal lights returned, he moved toward the window. An old photograph stood on the credenza. Julian in military uniform, a younger man beside him, an older man with Julian's eyes. You look happy, Hannah said. I was 23. Your father? Yes. And your brother Julian placed the photograph face down. What happened, life? That is not an answer. It is the only one you are getting. Snow moved beyond the windows like ash. You keep saying that. Because you keep asking questions that can hurt you. Or questions that hurt you. His shoulders went still. For a moment she thought he might answer. Instead, Julian said, Mason will drive you home. The distance returned to his voice. 2 days later, Mason reported that the black sedan had appeared near Hannah's apartment again. The driver had changed. The surveillance had not. Julian read the report twice. Move another team onto her father. We should tell her. No, she is already tracing Chesapeake Risk Solutions. Julian looked up. How do you know? She asked who approves route security. A mixture of anger and admiration crossed Julian's face. She will find the answer, Mason said. Not if I remove her access. She will notice that too. Julian closed the report. Then I will handle her. Mason almost smiled. No one handles Hannah. That evening, Julian waited until the office emptied. Hannah was shutting down her computer when he entered. You leave when I leave. She looked at him. I have plans. Cancel them. No. Mason drives you home. You do not walk to the garage alone. You do not stop anywhere. Hannah slowly lifted her coat. Why? Because I said so. That explanation stopped working on my first day. Julian stepped closer. This is not a discussion. Then you can have it by yourself. She reached for her purse. He caught the strap, then released it when she looked at his hand. You are being watched. Hannah went still. By whom I do not know. How long? He did not answer quickly enough. You knew about the sedan. Yes. The first night, yes. And you said nothing. I increased security. Without telling me. To keep you from panicking. She gave a disbelieving laugh. You have known me for a month. When have I panicked? This is different, because you are frightened. I am not frightened. You are trying to control every step I take. That is fear wearing an expensive suit. His eyes flashed. You leave with Mason. Give me one honest reason. I told you someone is watching. That is not the whole reason. It is enough. For you. She put on her coat. Maybe I should make this easier. Julian's chest tightened. What does that mean I resign? The word changed the room. The anger disappeared from his face. For one unguarded second, Julian looked like a man watching the only open door close. Do not. His voice came out rough. Is that an order? No. He swallowed. Please. The word frightened her more than his shouting ever had. She stepped toward him. What is happening, Julian? He looked at her as though the truth stood behind his teeth and tasted like blood. Before he could answer, the window behind him exploded. Glass burst across the office. Julian drove Hannah to the floor as the first bullet tore through the frosted doors. The sound arrived before thought. 3 sharp cracks. A pause. Then another round that splintered the wooden frame and sent paper lifting from Hannah's desk. Julian covered her with his body. Stay down. His voice had changed. There was no irritation in it now, no polished authority, only command stripped to instinct. Hannah felt him reach beneath his jacket. When he raised his hand again, a black pistol rested in it. For 1 second, she forgot the gunfire. The weapon answered every question he had refused to answer. The locked files, the men without badges, the false shipping records, the fear hidden beneath his anger. Julian Moretti was not merely surrounded by danger. He belonged to it. The office doors burst inward. A masked man entered with a rifle raised. Julian fired twice. The first shot struck the wall. The second caught the attacker in the chest. He fell against the broken frame, then collapsed across the carpet. Hannah stared at the body. Blood spread beneath him in a dark circle. Julian seized her shoulder. Look at me. She did. Can you move? Yes. Get behind the desk. Another bullet struck the wall above them. Julian pushed her toward the heavy mahogany desk. Hannah crawled across the glass, feeling shards bite through the knees of her trousers. She reached the desk and pulled herself behind it. Outside the office, Mason shouted an order. Gunfire answered him. The executive floor had become a storm of breaking glass boots and screaming alarms. Julian moved toward the doorway. Hannah caught his sleeve. Where are you going to end this? You cannot walk into that hallway. I am not walking. He pulled free and dropped behind a cabinet as another attacker fired through the opening. Julian returned 2 controlled shots. The man outside cried out. Mason appeared at the edge of the doorway, weapon in hand. There are at least 4. They came through the service corridor. How they had access cards. Julian's face went still. Someone inside Harbor Crown had opened the door for them. A body struck the floor near Hannah's desk. Nico Bell, one of the guards who usually stood outside Julian's office, landed on his side with one hand pressed against his shoulder. Blood pushed between his fingers. Hannah moved before she considered whether she should. She crawled from behind the desk. Julian saw her. Hannah, no. Nico is hit. Stay behind the desk. He is bleeding. Hannah. She ignored him. Glass cut her palm as she crossed the carpet. She barely felt it. Nico tried to push himself upright. His face had gone pale. "Stay down," Hannah said. "I am fine. You are leaking through your shirt." She pulled his hand away from the wound. The bullet had entered high in his shoulder. Blood flowed fast, but did not pulse. Hannah tore off her cardigan and folded it into a thick pad. Nico looked toward the hallway. "I need my weapon. You need pressure. There are men outside. There are also men inside. One of them is currently bleeding on my shoes." She pressed the cardigan against the wound. Nico groaned. "Hold this." He tried to lift his arm. Hannah forced it back down. "Move that hand and I will personally kill you after they fail." A broken laugh escaped him. Then another shot hit the desk. Hannah lowered herself over Nico. Across the room, Julian fired toward the doorway. His movements were precise, economical. He did not hesitate before pulling the trigger. This was not a wealthy executive protecting himself. This was a man who had done it before. A third attacker rushed into the office from the side. Julian turned, but the man reached him before he could fire. The rifle struck Julian's wrist. His pistol slid across the carpet. The attacker drove him into the wall. Hannah heard the air leave Julian's lungs. Mason raised his weapon but could not fire without hitting him. Julian caught the rifle barrel with both hands and twisted. The attacker drove a knee into his stomach. Julian folded, then rose with sudden violence. He struck the man beneath the jaw. Once. Twice. The attacker released the rifle and reached beneath his coat. Julian saw the knife. He stepped inside the movement, trapped the man's wrist, and turned his body. Bone cracked. The knife fell. Julian caught it before it reached the floor. One movement followed. Fast. Practiced. Final. The attacker stopped fighting. Julian lowered him to the ground and pulled the blade free. Hannah stared. Blood ran across Julian's knuckles. He looked at the body for less than a second, then reached for his pistol. Another part of him had entered the room. A part she had never met, and could not pretend she had not seen. "Where did you learn that?" she asked. Julian looked toward her. "Marines. You were a Marine." "Before my father died." Mason fired down the corridor. The alarms continued to scream. Julian crouched beside Hannah and Nico. He checked the wound, then looked at the blood on Hannah's hands. "Are you hurt?" "It is his blood." He touched the side of her face. His thumb came away red. "You are bleeding." "Glass." His hand trembled. The movement was slight, but Hannah saw it. "You are shaking." "I am not." "You are." His expression hardened as if anger could erase the evidence. "You were supposed to be safe here." The words struck harder than the gunfire. Hannah looked at him. "Safe from what?" Before he could answer, boots thundered through the outer office. Mason turned his weapon toward the hall. Moretti's security, a voice shouted, "Do not fire!" 4 men entered with guns raised. One checked the fallen attackers. Another secured the service corridor. Mason gave rapid orders. "Lock the elevators. No one leaves the building. Find out who used those access cards." Julian looked at Nico. "Get him to Dr. Shaw." "I can walk," Nico said. Hannah pressed harder against the wound. "You can barely lie down." 2 guards lifted him onto a makeshift stretcher. Nico caught Hannah's wrist. "Thank you. You can thank me by not dying." He nodded once before they carried him away. Julian stood and pulled Hannah to her feet. His hand closed around her arm. "We are leaving." She resisted. "No." His eyes flashed. "This is not the time. It is exactly the time." Who were they? Not here. What is Harbor Crown Hannah? You owe me the truth. Another guard approached Julian and whispered something. Julian's face changed. 2 of the attackers were dead. One was alive. None carried identification, but they all bore the same small tattoo inside the wrist, a black crown crossed by a knife. Santoro. Julian looked toward the shattered window. The city beyond it seemed untouched. Traffic moved below. Rain ran down the glass that remained. Inside the office, blood soaked the carpet. Julian removed his coat and placed it around Hannah's shoulders. "Come with me. I'm not getting into a car until you answer me." He stepped closer. "If the men who sent them know you are alive, they will try again." Her anger faltered. Not because she was less furious, because she believed him. Julian lowered his voice. "You can hate me in a safer place." The elevator ride down was silent. Mason stood beside them with his weapon visible. 2 guards waited in the garage. Julian kept one hand at Hannah's back as they crossed to a black sport utility vehicle. She felt the pressure through his coat. It was not possession. It was fear. The vehicle moved through Baltimore with 2 other cars surrounding it. Hannah watched the city pass through darkened windows. The roads shone beneath the rain. Streetlights stretched across the pavement in broken gold lines. People waited beneath bus shelters, carried groceries, and hurried toward warm apartments. Ordinary lives continued 3 feet beyond the glass. Hannah sat with another man's blood drying beneath her fingernails. Julian said nothing. She did not ask again. Not yet. The safe house stood inside a converted cannery near Canton. From the outside, it looked abandoned. The brick walls were stained by decades of weather. The upper windows had been painted black. Inside, steel doors opened into a restored loft with exposed beams, leather furniture, and cameras covering every entrance. Mason checked each room before allowing them inside. Julian led Hannah toward the kitchen. A medical kit rested on the counter. "Sit." She remained standing. "I said sit. And I heard you." He reached for her injured hand. She pulled it away. "Do not give me another order." His jaw tightened. "You have glass in your palm. I also have questions. Let me clean the wound. Answer me." For a long moment they faced each other across the kitchen. Mason stood near the door. Julian looked at him. Outside, Mason hesitated. "Julian, now." Mason left and closed the steel door. The silence that followed felt heavier than the gunfire. Hannah removed Julian's coat and laid it over a chair. Blood marked the cuffs of her blouse. A cut near her temple had begun to sting. She placed both hands on the counter. "Tell me what Harbor Crown is." Julian opened the medical kit. "A logistics company." She laughed once. The sound carried no humor. "Try again." He removed antiseptic and gauze. "Hannah." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small encrypted drive. Julian stopped. "I already know the manifests are false." His eyes settled on the drive. "I know the container weights do not match. I know Chesapeake Risk Solutions receives money every time a route changes. I know Customs keeps appearing at locations your ships were supposed to use." She placed the drive between them. "And now men with rifles have tried to kill me inside your office." Julian's face became unreadable. "How long have you been tracking this 3 weeks? You should have stopped when I told you. You should have told me why. You had no right to open private records. I did not open private records. I compared documents you placed on my desk." She stepped closer. "You do not get to hide behind confidentiality anymore." Julian said nothing. Hannah's voice dropped. "You do not get to protect me with another lie." Something in him gave way, not all at once. She saw it in the way his shoulders lowered and his hand loosened around the gauze. He looked older than he had that morning. "Harbor Crown is real," he said. "That is not enough. It moves legal freight, machinery, construction material, medical equipment, and the false containers." Julian looked toward the black windows. My grandfather built the company when the port still belonged to men who settled disputes with knives. He moved cigarettes first, then liquor, then money. Hannah waited. My father expanded it. Protection, weapons, cash transfers, anything that could cross a dock without being noticed. And you, his voice became quieter. I left. She thought of the photograph in his office. The Marines. Yes. Why did you come back? My father and brother were killed in the same month. The words landed without drama. That made them worse. By Santoro men working for him. Julian leaned against the counter. My mother stopped sleeping. Raymond was trying to hold the family together. Every crew that had sworn loyalty to my father started choosing sides. He looked at Hannah. I came home for the funeral. I stayed because if I left, the people who killed them would have taken everything. You mean the company? I mean my family. The people who worked for us. The neighborhoods dependent on our contracts. Everyone. Hannah studied him. You took control. Yes, you killed people. He did not answer immediately. Yes. The honesty shocked her more than denial would have. What do the false containers carry, Cash? Weapons, sometimes drugs. Her stomach turned. What kind of drugs? Julian looked away. Hannah. What kind heroin? Fentanyl. Whatever the crews move without my direct approval. She stared at him. Without your direct approval is not the same as without your knowledge. No. The answer came without defense. You helped put poison into the same city where my father worked his entire life. I know. Do you? Her voice rose. Do you know what that means to people who do not have guards outside their doors? Do you know what it looks like when a family loses someone and there is no private doctor to call Julian except at every word? He did not interrupt. I made choices, he said. Bad ones. Yes. Do you want me to tell you that you had no choice? No. Good. She turned away because looking at him had become too difficult. For weeks she had separated Julian from the unease surrounding Harbor Crown. She had believed there must be a line between the man who remembered how she took her coffee and the man whose records did not make sense. There was no line. Both men were standing in the room. Julian approached carefully. Your hand. She looked at the blood running from her palm. Sit, he said, then corrected himself. Please. The word was quieter than before. Hannah sat at the kitchen table. Julian knelt beside her. He cleaned the cut without speaking. His hands were steady now, though dried blood still marked his knuckles. Hannah watched him remove a sliver of glass. You knew I was being watched. Yes. You knew before tonight. Yes. And you let me keep coming to the office. I increased security. That is not an answer. I believed you were outside the business. I handled your calls, your schedules, your files. You did not know what they meant. That made me less safe, not more. Julian pressed gauze against her palm. I know. You keep saying that, because there is nothing else I can say. There is always something else. He tied the bandage and remained kneeling. Hannah looked down at him. You should have let me quit. His eyes lifted to hers. I tried to keep you away from the dangerous parts. You tried to keep me close without letting me understand the price. His silence confirmed it. Why Julian stood. He walked toward the window and stopped with his back to her. Outside, rain traced the black glass. Everyone who comes into my office is afraid of me. Hannah waited. They measure every word. They apologize before they speak. They look at the door when I raise my voice. He turned. You did not. That is why you lied. That is why I wanted you to stay. The anger inside her shifted into something more dangerous, something that hurt. You could have asked. I did not know how. You know how to command armed men. That is easier. The room held still. Julian came closer but left space between them. You looked at me and saw a difficult man with a broken calendar. You were a difficult man with a broken calendar. I wanted to remain that man when you looked at me. Hannah swallowed. That man was not real. He was with you. She looked away. Tenderness rose where it had no right to exist. She hated him for creating it. You lied to me. Yes. People almost died tonight. Yes. Nico might still die. Julian's face tightened. Yes. And I almost died. He closed his eyes for 1 second. When he opened them, the control had cracked. I know. His voice was rough. I have replayed that bullet hitting the window every second since we left. Hannah looked at him. I thought you were dead before I reached the floor. He stepped forward, then stopped himself. I can send you away tonight. Where, anywhere. Another state, another country, if necessary. Your father will be moved with you. You will have protection. You think that solves it. It keeps you alive. Victor Santoro knows my name. He knows where my father is treated. He has people inside your company. I will handle him. You have been handling him for years. Julian's expression hardened. He reached the 46th floor. The truth struck cleanly. Hannah picked up the encrypted drive and slid it toward him. I found a leak. Julian stared at the device. The payments to Chesapeake Risk Solutions happen after route changes, not before. That means someone receives the new schedule, passes the information outside, then invoices the company to make the payment look legitimate. Who approves the invoices? Peter Lang in operations. Julian's eyes narrowed. Peter has worked for Harbor Crown for 14 years. That only means he has had 14 years to learn where no one looks. Julian inserted the drive into a secured laptop. A spreadsheet opened. Dates, route numbers, payments, customs inspections, names. Hannah had arranged them into a pattern impossible to dismiss. Julian studied the screen. You did this alone? Yes. You should not have been able to access enough information. I did not need all the information. I needed the mistakes. He looked at her. Peter may be careless. He may not be the source. Then give me access to prove it. No. The answer came instantly. Hannah stood. You just admitted someone inside your company helped armed men reach your office. That does not make you part of the investigation. They came for me. They came for me. They fired through the window while I was standing beside you. Julian closed the laptop. I will not put you deeper into this. You already did. I can still get you out. No, you can move me. That is not the same thing. He stepped closer. What do you want from me? Trust. You do not understand what you are asking. I understand perfectly. She pointed toward the laptop. I understand numbers. I understand schedules. I understand how people hide theft inside routine. Your men look for guns. I look for patterns. This is not an office problem. It became an office problem when someone used your calendar to plan an attack. Julian said nothing. Hannah gathered Julian's coat and placed it on the back of the chair. If you refuse, I walk out. You cannot leave this building. You cannot keep me here. I can if leaving gets you killed. Her eyes hardened. Then I will spend every day trying to escape your protection. The words struck him. You would rather be unprotected than safe with me. I would rather be afraid by choice than safe in a cage. Julian looked at the bandage around her palm. The fight went out of his face. Hannah lowered her voice. You can keep giving orders and spend the rest of your life wondering whether the next car outside my apartment belongs to Santoro. She moved closer. Or you can trust me enough to help end this. Julian recognized the words before she finished. Pick one. For several seconds only the rain answered. Then Julian turned the laptop toward her. What do you need? Hannah sat beside him. Everything Peter Lang approved in the last 18 months. Julian opened a secured folder. Rows of hidden accounts filled the screen. Hannah placed her injured hand near the keyboard. Julian caught her wrist gently. Use the other one. She looked at him. His thumb rested against her pulse. This time she did not pull away. Mason knocked once and entered. Nico is stable. Hannah released a breath she had not realized she was holding. Mason looked from her to the laptop. What is happening? Julian stepped aside. Hannah is going to find the man who opened our door. Mason studied her blood-stained blouse and bandaged hand. Then he placed a second chair beside the table. Julian opened the first account. Hannah began to read. Hannah began with the accounts Peter Lang had approved. By sunrise, the table inside the safe house had disappeared beneath printed invoices, shipping manifests, access logs, and handwritten notes. Mason brought coffee. Julian brought more files. Neither spoke unless Hannah asked a question. She moved through the records with quiet concentration. Peter had approved payments to Chesapeake Risk Solutions for 18 months. Most were small enough to avoid attention. None were large enough to trigger an automatic review. The amounts changed, but the timing did not. A Harbor Crown route was revised. Peter opened the revised schedule. Chesapeake sent an invoice. Customs officers appeared at the original destination. Someone outside the company received the new route and used the old one to make Harbor Crown believe the security change had worked. Hannah spread 6 invoices across the table. These are not security fees. Julian stood behind her. What are they? Payments for information. Mason leaned closer. All approved by Peter. Yes, but Peter does not control the final accounts. Hannah tapped a name printed beneath the transfer authorization. Michael Rizzo. Julian recognized it immediately. Victor Santoro's accountant, his financial director Mason said. He has managed Santoro's books for 20 years. Hannah opened another file. He is also sending duplicate records somewhere else. Julian's attention sharpened. Where I do not know yet. She pointed at a line of coded transfers. The amounts leaving Chesapeake do not match the amounts entering Rizzo's accounts. A percentage disappears every month. Mason crossed his arms. He is stealing from Victor. Maybe. Hannah stared at the numbers. Or he is paying for protection. Julian looked toward the dark windows. Federal protection. Hannah turned to him. You think Rizzo is cooperating with investigators? I think Victor has survived too many investigations because someone always takes the fall for him. If Rizzo believes Victor would sacrifice him, he may have made another arrangement. Mason pulled out his phone. I can check federal court contacts. Julian stopped him. No calls. Not until we know who Peter is speaking to. Hannah slid the access logs toward Mason. The men who entered the office used valid cards issued to a maintenance company. Peter authorized the company for a weekend repair 6 months ago. Mason's jaw tightened. He left the credentials active. He did more than that, Hannah said. He accessed the executive floor security system 11 minutes before the attack. Julian's expression became cold. Bring him in. No. Both men looked at Hannah. She continued. If Peter disappears now, Victor knows we found the leak. He changes every account, every route, and every phone before we can see where the information goes. Julian rested both hands on the table. He helped armed men enter my office, and he believes they failed. You want me to let him keep walking through my building? I want him to keep making mistakes. Julian studied her. A day earlier, he would have refused before she finished the sentence. Now he asked, What do you need 3 false schedules? Mason pulled out a chair. Hannah opened a blank spreadsheet. 1 for Peter, 1 for Raymond, 1 for your port captain. Julian frowned. My uncle is not a suspect. Then his version will not leave the room. Hannah, you asked me to find the leak. I asked you to find Peter's contact. And I am telling you, Peter may not be the only one. Mason watched Julian carefully. Julian looked at the names on the screen. Then he nodded. Do it. The Moretti estate stood north of the city behind stone walls and iron gates. Hannah arrived just before noon wearing borrowed clothes from a closet inside the safe house. Her blood-stained blouse remained sealed inside an evidence bag. The cut near her temple had been covered with a narrow bandage. The dining room had been converted into a war room. Maps covered the walls. Photographs of docks, warehouses, and known Santoro properties rested on easels. 6 men sat around a long walnut table. Every conversation stopped when Hannah entered. Raymond Moretti sat at the head. His silver hair was perfectly combed. His dark suit carried none of Julian's modern restraint. He looked like a man who had worn authority so long it had become part of his posture. His eyes moved over Hannah. This is the secretary. Julian removed his coat. This is Hannah Reed. I know her name. Then use it. The room became silent. Raymond leaned back. Julian placed Hannah's encrypted drive on the table. She found the breach. One of the captains looked toward Mason. Your security team found nothing. Mason did not react. Hannah noticed a payment pattern before we knew there was a leak. Raymond looked at her bandaged hand. And now she is part of a family meeting. Hannah stepped toward the screen. Only until your family understands why men with rifles reached Julian's office. She connected her laptop. The first spreadsheet appeared on the wall. No one invited her to sit. She did not need the invitation. Every compromised Harbor Crown route connects to Chesapeake Risk Solutions. Peter Lang approved each payment, but the money did not stop with him. She displayed the transfers to Michael Rizzo. A murmur moved around the table. Raymond narrowed his eyes. Rizzo is Santoro's man. He is also taking money from both organizations. Hannah changed the page. Some of it goes into personal accounts. Some disappears through businesses that exist only on paper. A captain near the end of the table shook his head. You expect us to believe Victor Santoro does not know his own accountant is stealing? I expect you to believe powerful men often stop checking the people who have served them the longest. The captain looked offended. Hannah glanced at Raymond. So do families. Julian almost smiled. Raymond did not. How long did it take you to find this? 3 weeks to notice. 1 night to prove. And our accountants missed it for 18 months. They were looking for missing money. What were you looking for? Repeated mistakes. Hannah displayed the customs reports. The Santoro organization keeps receiving accurate route changes, but federal officers also keep arriving at the previous locations. Someone is selling Victor the new information while giving investigators enough old information to protect himself, Rizzo Raymond said. Probably. But Peter is the channel inside Harbor Crown. Julian moved beside her. We need both men to believe they are still safe. Hannah showed the 3 false routes. Each led to a different warehouse. Each included a unique container number. Peter receives one. Raymond receives another. The port captain receives the 3rd. Whichever location Santoro targets identifies the source. Raymond's face hardened. You are testing me. I am testing information. I buried men before you learned how to read a ledger. Hannah met his eyes. And someone still walked through your family's front door with valid access cards. Several men looked down. Raymond's expression turned dangerous. Julian stepped forward. She is not wrong. Raymond looked at his nephew for a long moment. Then he turned back to Hannah. What else? She opened a map of Locust Point. Victor believes I am Julian's weakness. One captain laughed quietly. Julian looked at him. The laughter stopped. Hannah continued. We let him believe Julian is moving me to a secure location near the port. No, Julian said. Hannah did not look at him. We use a controlled vehicle. Mason follows with 2 teams. I carry a tracker and an open microphone. No. Raymond's gaze moved between them. You brought her here without discussing this? She did not tell me this part. I knew your answer. Julian stepped closer to her. My answer has not changed. Hannah closed the map. Then Victor keeps watching my father's hospital. The muscle near Julian's jaw tightened. He will be moved out of Maryland. Victor will still know you care. He can believe anything he wants. He built the office attack around that belief. Julian lowered his voice. This meeting is finished. No, it is not. Every man at the table watched them. Hannah unplugged the laptop and walked into the adjoining library. Julian followed. He closed the door behind them. You will not use yourself as bait. I am already bait. You are a target. There is a difference. Only if I remain passive. I watched bullets come through a wall toward you, and I watched you lie to me until they did. His face changed. Hannah softened her voice. I know you are afraid. You do not know what I am. I know exactly what you are when you think you might lose someone. Julian looked away. You become cruel because anger is easier to survive. His gaze returned to her. You could die. So could you. That is different. Only to you. He walked toward the fireplace, then stopped. I can place 20 men around you, and Victor will wait until one of them makes a mistake. Hannah, trust is not locking me behind a steel door while you decide which risks I am allowed to understand. Julian said nothing. She stepped closer. I am not asking you to stop being afraid. I am asking you not to turn your fear into my cage. His eyes closed briefly. When he looked at her again, the fight remained, but the answer had changed. 2 vehicles. 1. 2. Mason stays close enough to see me. He stays close enough to touch the door. Fine. You wear a tracker in your shoe and another in your coat. One in my shoe. They may search the coat. A microphone under your blouse. Yes, you do not leave the vehicle. That is the plan. Julian came closer. If the plan changes, you get out. If the plan changes, I make the safest decision available. That is not what I said. It is the most you are getting. For several seconds, he stared at her. Then he touched the bandage near her temple with the back of his fingers. If anything happens to you, it already has. His hand lowered. Hannah opened the library door. Raymond remained at the head of the table. He looked at Julian. She wins often. Julian returned to his seat. Constantly. The false schedules entered the system that afternoon. Peter Lang received a route leading to Pier 19 in Locust Point. Raymond received an address near Dundalk. The port captain received a warehouse outside Curtis Bay. 3 hours later, Mason intercepted a Santoro message referencing Pier 19. Peter was the leak. The plan moved forward before sunset. Hannah visited Walter at St. Catherine to make her routine appear unchanged. She did not tell him about the office attack. She wore long sleeves to hide the bandage on her palm and blamed the cut on her temple on a broken cabinet. Walter watched her too closely. You look tired. I had a long night. Your boss involved? Unfortunately. He waiting outside again? Hannah looked through the glass. Julian stood at the end of the corridor speaking with Mason. Yes. Walter smiled faintly. Thought so. Hannah adjusted his blanket. The doctor says your procedure can happen next week. The doctor also says I am not supposed to upset myself. Then stop asking questions. You really are spending too much time with that man. She kissed his forehead. I will call you tonight. You always do. The words followed her into the hallway. Julian ended his call. You can still stop. So can you. I cannot. Neither can I. He looked toward Walter's room. If this goes wrong. Hannah touched his wrist. Do not say it. Julian turned his hand beneath hers and held it for 1 second. Then he let go. The decoy vehicle waited near the hospital entrance. Mason drove. Hannah sat in the rear seat wearing the microphone beneath her blouse and the tracker inside the heel of her shoe. A second vehicle followed half a block behind. Julian remained at the estate with Raymond monitoring every movement. The vehicle turned south toward the harbor. Mason checked the mirror. Black sedan behind us. Hannah looked forward. Same one, different plates. Same driving pattern. Her pulse quickened. Mason touched the microphone near his collar. Target has engaged. Julian's voice came through Hannah's earpiece. I hear you. She looked out at the wet streets. I assumed you would. You can stop now. Mason, please turn off the part where he can issue unnecessary orders. Mason almost smiled. Then a delivery truck entered the intersection against the light. Mason braked hard. A sedan struck the rear quarter panel. Metal screamed. Hannah hit the door. Before Mason could move, another vehicle blocked the street behind them. This is not the plan, he said. The passenger window shattered. Mason reached for his weapon. Smoke filled the vehicle. Hannah heard Julian shouting through the earpiece. Hannah, get down! The rear door opened. A masked man seized her arm. Hannah struck him with her elbow, but another man pulled her from the opposite side. Mason fired through the smoke. Someone screamed. Hannah's microphone tore loose as she was dragged across the pavement. Julian. A hand covered her mouth. The earpiece fell beneath the vehicle. The last thing she heard was Julian calling her name. Then the van door slammed. At the Moretti estate, the audio dissolved into static. Julian ripped off his headset. Location. Mason's remaining team reported from the collision. One guard had been shot. Mason was conscious but injured. Hannah was gone. Raymond stood. Julian. Julian swept a glass from the table. It shattered against the wall. Find every Santoro property. That is what Victor wants. I do not care. You will if attacking the wrong location gets her killed. Julian turned on him. The entire room moved back. Raymond did not. She found Peter because she stayed calm, Raymond said. Do the same. Julian's breathing was uneven. She will leave us something, he said. It sounded less like certainty than prayer. Inside the van, Hannah forced herself to breathe through her nose. Her wrists had been bound with plastic restraints. A cloth covered her eyes. 2 men sat beside her. She listened. The van crossed railroad tracks. A cargo horn sounded somewhere to the east. They turned right, then right again. The air smelled of saltwater rust and diesel. One man searched her coat and found the tracker sewn into the lining. He crushed it beneath his boot. Moretti thought we would miss that. The second man searched her shoes but failed to notice the thin device hidden inside the heel. Hannah shifted her hands beneath the restraints. A metal button on her sleeve had loosened during the struggle. She twisted it free and let it drop near the rear door. The van slowed. A chain gate opened. They drove over uneven concrete and stopped. Hannah was pulled outside. When the cloth came off, she stood inside an old warehouse filled with empty cargo containers. Victor Santoro waited beneath a hanging light. He looked smaller than she expected. Gray hair, dark coat, clean hands. Power did not always announce itself through size. Sometimes it stood quietly while other men carried the guns. Hannah Reed. She looked around. Peter Lang stood near a folding table. His face was slick with sweat. Victor noticed her recognition. You know Peter? He approves bad invoices. Peter looked away. Victor smiled. I understand why Julian kept you. You understand very little about Julian. Enough to bring him here. 2 men forced her into a chair. Peter opened a laptop. Victor placed 3 Harbor Crown container numbers on the table. You will release these from port security. I cannot. You rebuilt Julian's entire scheduling system. That does not make me a customs officer. Peter leaned close. You have executive access. Hannah looked at him. You sold armed men access to your own office. Peter's mouth tightened. I did what I had to do. No, you did what paid you. Victor drew a pistol and shot Peter through the shoulder. The sound filled the warehouse. Peter collapsed beside the table, screaming. Victor looked at Hannah. Do not confuse my patience with mercy. Blood spread beneath Peter. Hannah's hands began to shake. She placed them on the keyboard before Victor noticed. I need the warehouse scanner. Peter groaned from the floor. One of Victor's men placed a barcode reader beside the laptop. Hannah connected it. The device identified its current inventory zone. Pier 19, Locust Point. She scanned the code. Across the city, Harbor Crown's system registered a new timestamp. At the Moretti estate, a notification appeared on Hannah's spreadsheet. Julian stared at the screen. Pier 19, Locust Point. His breath caught. Raymond reached for his coat. She found us. Julian loaded his weapon. That is my girl. Victor forced Hannah to access the Santoro accounts linked to the stolen containers. He believed she was clearing their release. Instead, she opened the files connected to Michael Rizzo. Transfer records, federal contact numbers, protected witness payments, internal Santoro accounts. She built a distribution list from addresses stored inside Peter's stolen access files. Every Santoro captain, every major partner, Raymond's secure server. A federal evidence address linked to Rizzo. The upload began. Victor watched Julian's location on a second screen. He is coming. Hannah kept typing. You sound surprised. I expected him to bring an army. He knows you would kill me if he did. Victor looked pleased. He finally understands. Julian entered alone through the loading bay 20 minutes later. 2 Santoro men searched him and removed one weapon. They missed the smaller pistol secured beneath his coat. Victor forced him to his knees. Hannah sat at the folding table with the laptop open. Peter lay 6 feet away, blood spreading beneath his shoulder. A gunman pressed a pistol against the back of her head. The upload reached 87%. Victor gestured toward her. Tell your secretary to stop. Julian's eyes remained fixed on Hannah. Hannah. She kept typing. The gunman pushed the barrel harder against her skull. I said stop. She glanced at the screen. 92%. You also told me never to leave unfinished work on your desk. Even on his knees, Julian almost smiled. Victor approached. You think this is funny? No, Hannah said. I think your accountant is about to ruin your evening. 97%. Victor's expression tightened. You know what happened to the last woman who tried to embarrass me? Hannah looked up. No, but I know what happened to the 11 women who worked for Julian before me. Victor raised an eyebrow. They quit. He frightened them. And you? Hannah returned to the keyboard. He irritates me. A gunshot exploded through the warehouse. The man behind Hannah fell. Nico stood on the catwalk with one arm secured against his chest and a pistol in his other hand. Upload it, he shouted. The warehouse lights went out. Julian moved. He drove his shoulder into the man beside him, drew the hidden pistol and fired toward the loading doors. Mason's team entered from both sides. Gunfire flashed between the containers. Hannah dropped to the floor. The laptop struck the concrete but remained open. 99%. Peter reached toward the keyboard. Hannah kicked his hand away. You have done enough. The upload completed. Phones began ringing throughout the warehouse. Victor stared at his screen. His captains had received Rizzo's records. His partners had received evidence that their routes had been exposed to federal investigators. His own men were learning that he had known about the losses and concealed them. Victor ran. Julian followed him toward an open loading corridor overlooking the dark harbor. Hannah cut her restraints on a broken piece of metal and went after them. She found Julian holding Victor against a railing. The pistol pressed beneath Victor's chin. Victor laughed. "You lost your father, your brother. Now you nearly lost her." Julian's finger rested on the trigger. "You were stronger before you cared," Victor whispered. Hannah saw Julian's face. She saw grief older than their first meeting, rage older than Harbor Crown, a son kneeling beside two graves and deciding violence was the only language left to him. "Julian." He did not look at her. Victor smiled. "Tell him what he is." Hannah stepped closer. "You told me you came home because you had no choice." Julian's grip tightened. She kept her voice steady. "You have one now." Sirens approached from beyond the warehouse. Victor's phone continued ringing. Santoro soldiers lowered their weapons one by one. No one was willing to die for a man who had sold their safety to protect his name. Julian looked at Victor. Then he lowered the gun. Police entered through the loading bay. Victor stared at Hannah as officers pulled his hands behind his back. "You destroyed everything." Hannah looked toward the open laptop. "No." Her voice carried across the warehouse. "I organized it." Outside, rain struck the pavement. Julian found Hannah beneath a security light and checked her face, her wrists, and the cut on her temple. His hands shook. She caught them. "I am alive. You were taken because of me. I was found because you trusted me. I almost killed him, but you did not." His eyes searched hers. "I do not know how to be the man you deserve." Hannah touched the blood on his collar. "Start by becoming the man you keep pretending you cannot be." He kissed her. There was nothing careful about the first second. Fear, relief, and weeks of restraint broke between them at once. Then Julian slowed. His hand rose to her face, giving her time to step away. She did not. When they separated, the siren still echoed across the water. Mason called Julian's name from the loading bay. Hannah looked toward the warehouse. "This is not finished." Julian followed her gaze. "No." She released his coat. "But it is different now." Julian looked at the woman who had entered his office for a paycheck and walked into his war by choice. For the first time since returning to Baltimore, he did not see the future as something inherited from dead men. He saw it standing in front of him, bruised, furious, and entirely unwilling to surrender. For the first time since returning to Baltimore, Julian did not see the future as something inherited from dead men. He saw it standing in front of him, bruised, furious, and entirely unwilling to surrender. Then the warehouse doors opened, and the future became paperwork. Ambulances, police lights, and blood drying beneath the cold rain. Hannah gave her statement from the back of an ambulance. A paramedic cleaned the cut near her temple while 2 federal agents waited nearby. Across the loading yard, Victor Santoro was placed inside an unmarked vehicle with his hands cuffed behind him. He did not look at Julian. He looked at Hannah. Even from a distance, she could feel the hatred in his stare. Julian stepped between them. Victor disappeared behind the closing door. Hannah watched the vehicle leave. What happens to him now? Julian remained beside her. "He will be charged." "That is not what I asked." He understood. "You want to know whether someone inside a jail cell will reach him first?" "Yes." Julian looked toward Raymond, who stood beneath the warehouse awning speaking with Mason. "Once, I would have made sure of it. And now," his gaze returned to her. "Now I let the evidence do what bullets cannot." Hannah studied his face, searching for the part of him that still wanted revenge. It was there. It probably always would be. The difference was that he had chosen not to obey it. Nico approached with his injured arm strapped against his chest. The color had returned to his face, though each step cost him effort. "You should be in a hospital," Hannah said. "I left one. That was foolish. I had unfinished work. She looked at the gun in his good hand. You people have a dangerous relationship with that phrase. Nico smiled. You saved my life. You saved mine. Then we are even. No, Julian said. You ignored medical orders and entered a warehouse with one working arm. Nico looked at Hannah. He is still angry. He is always angry. I am standing here, Julian said. Hannah glanced at him. We noticed. Mason joined them with a bruise forming along his jaw. Federal agents are taking control of the scene. Peter Lang is alive. He is asking for a lawyer and protection. Julian's expression hardened. Hannah noticed. He can testify, she said. He opened the door to men who tried to kill you. And if he talks, he can help close every door Victor used. Julian did not answer. Mason looked between them. I will tell the agents he is willing to cooperate. Julian's eyes remained on Hannah. Do it. The ambulance took Hannah to St. Catherine. Julian rode with her. He sat across from the stretcher, one hand resting against his knee, the other marked with dried blood. For most of the drive, neither spoke. The city moved beyond the rear windows in fragments of red light and wet pavement. Hannah watched him. What are you thinking? That I should have seen the collision coming. Mason did not see it. I should have. You are not responsible for every bad thing that happens. Julian looked at her. That belief has kept my family alive. It has also made you believe control and responsibility are the same. The ambulance turned sharply. Julian reached for the side rail beside her. Hannah covered his hand with hers. He looked down at their fingers. She did not release him. You trusted me in the warehouse, she said. I was terrified. Those things can exist together. His thumb moved once against her skin. I thought the gunshot killed you. I thought so too. His face tightened. Hannah squeezed his hand, but it did not. At the hospital, a nurse placed Hannah in a private examination room. Julian waited outside while doctors checked her for a concussion and treated the bruises around her wrists. Walter was sleeping 2 floors above. Hannah refused to wake him. He will know something happened, Julian said. He knows when I changed shampoo. You cannot hide this. I know. She looked at the hospital gown folded across the chair. I just want 1 more hour before I become his problem. Julian stepped inside. You are not a problem. Hannah gave him a tired look. That is almost romantic. I am not good at romantic. No. You are better at sending armored vehicles. They are reliable. She smiled despite herself. The smile disappeared when she saw the blood on his shirt. You need a doctor. It is not mine. Some of it is. He looked down. A cut along his ribs had opened beneath the fabric. Hannah pointed toward the examination table. Sit. He raised an eyebrow. Is that an order? Yes. Julian sat. She found clean gauze inside a cabinet and began unbuttoning his shirt. His eyes stayed on her face. Hannah stopped. What? Nothing. That is rarely true. The corner of his mouth moved. She cleaned the cut. It was shallow, but the skin around it had begun to bruise. You should not have entered alone. If I had brought men through the front, Victor would have killed you. So you allowed yourself to be captured. Yes, that was reckless. Julian looked at her bandaged wrists. So was volunteering as bait. I did not volunteer to be kidnapped. No, you only volunteered for everything before it. She pressed the gauze harder than necessary. He flinched. That was deliberate. A little. He caught her hand before she could pull away. The room went still. The noise of the hospital continued outside. Wheels moved across tile. A monitor sounded down the corridor. Someone laughed near the nurse's station. Inside the small room, Julian looked at her as if the rest of Baltimore had disappeared. I meant what I said outside the warehouse. Hannah lowered her voice. You said you did not know how to become the man I deserve. I do not. Then stop thinking of it as a performance. His fingers loosened around hers. "What do you want me to do?" "Make different choices. Starting with, let me leave tonight without guards inside my room." His expression changed immediately. "Hannah, you asked. Victor still has people. Then place someone outside the hospital, not beside my bed." Julian looked toward the door. Every instinct in him resisted. She could see the argument forming, then he nodded. Outside the floor, outside the building, the lobby, the parking entrance. "Hannah. Julian." He stared at her. "The lobby," he said. She accepted. It was the first negotiation they completed without either of them walking away. Walter learned the truth the following morning. Not all of it. Hannah told him that Harbor Crown had been targeted by a criminal organization, that she had been taken because of her work, and that Julian helped bring her home. Walter listened from his hospital bed without interrupting. When she finished, he looked at the bruises on her wrists. "You were kidnapped." "Yes." "You were held at gunpoint." "Yes." "And you came here wearing his coat." Hannah glanced at the black coat draped across the chair. "That is what you noticed. I am trying not to shout in a cardiac ward." Julian stood near the window. Walter turned to him. "You." Julian moved closer. "Yes, sir. My daughter nearly died because of your company." "Yes. You brought this into her life." "Yes." Hannah looked at Julian. He did not defend himself. Walter's voice lowered. "Do you love her?" Julian answered without hesitation. "Yes." Hannah stopped breathing. Walter looked at her. She said nothing. He returned his attention to Julian. "Does she love you?" "That is not mine to answer." Walter studied him for a long time. Then he pointed toward the chair. "Sit down." Julian sat. Walter leaned back against the pillow. "I spent 30 years repairing electrical systems at the port. I know what the Moretti name means." Hannah turned to him. "You knew I knew enough to tell you not to work there. You never did. You needed the money. You would have gone anyway. That is not an excuse. No, it is an explanation." Walter looked at Julian again. "Powerful men like to believe protecting someone gives them the right to decide for them." Julian remained silent. "My daughter has spent her whole life making herself smaller so everyone else could remain comfortable." Hannah's throat tightened. Walter continued. "She took bad jobs because I needed medicine. She smiled when people spoke over her. She apologized for taking up space in rooms she was the smartest person in." His eyes hardened. "She will not do that for you." Julian leaned forward. "I would not ask her to. You already did." The words landed cleanly. Julian lowered his gaze. "Yes." Walter watched him. "What are you going to do about it?" Julian looked toward Hannah. "Anything she allows." Walter nodded slowly. "That is a better answer." Hannah crossed her arms. "Are you both finished discussing me as if I am not here?" Walter smiled. "There she is." Hannah did not return to Harbor Crown the next day, or the day after that. For the first time in 14 months, she allowed herself to stop moving. She stayed with Walter through his preoperative tests. She slept in her own apartment. She ignored calls from the staffing agency and kept the television on at night because silence made the warehouse return. Sometimes she woke with the weight of a pistol against her skull. Sometimes she heard the gunshot before opening her eyes. Julian did not enter her apartment. He did not send flowers. He did not ask when she was coming back. A single security car remained near the building, parked far enough away to respect the boundary they had negotiated. Every morning a message appeared on her phone. "Nico is recovering. Peter is cooperating. Victor has been denied bail. Your father's procedure remains scheduled." No questions followed. On the 5th morning, the message was different. "I am sorry." Hannah read it 3 times. She did not answer. On the 7th day, Diane called. Hannah almost let it go to voicemail. "Hello?" Diane released a breath. "You are alive." "I am. I heard things. Most of them are probably true." Diane was quiet. "Is Mr. Moretti with you? No." "He has not shouted in a week. That sounds healthy. It is terrifying." Hannah sat near her apartment window. "How is the office quiet? Peter's access has been removed. Federal investigators took 3 computers. Mr. Raymond has been here every day." "And Julian?" "He works. He leaves food untouched. He stands at your desk sometimes." Hannah looked down. Diane continued. "He has not replaced you. I was not planning to be replaced. Are you coming back?" Hannah watched the security car across the street. "I do not know." Diane lowered her voice. "The first assistant lasted 4 hours. The second lasted 2 days. The 7th found a gun in a drawer and left without her shoes." Hannah remembered the unfinished resignation letter. What happened to the others? "Nothing like the rumors. They were frightened. Mr. Moretti paid them and made them sign confidentiality agreements. One moved to Philadelphia. Another became a real estate agent. And the 4 Diane would not explain, they saw things they should not have. Arguments. Injured men. Cash. Did Julian threaten them?" "No." Diane paused. "He frightened them because he never explained anything. He believed silence was protection." Hannah closed her eyes. That sounded like him. "He was wrong," Diane said. "Yes, he knows. That does not fix it." "No." Diane's voice softened. "But it is the first time I have heard him admit he was wrong." Walter's surgery took place 3 days later. Hannah sat in the waiting room with both hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she never drank. Julian did not come inside. She knew he was somewhere in the building because Mason stood near the elevators. After the 4th hour, Hannah walked toward him. "Where is he?" Mason glanced toward a side corridor. He did not want to make this about him. She found Julian alone near a vending machine at the end of the hall. He stood when he saw her. "You should be with your father. They are still operating." He nodded. The distance between them felt wider than the corridor. "You could have come inside. I did not know whether you wanted me there. I did not know either." Julian looked toward the operating room doors. "How long?" 4 hours. Dr. Porter said 6 would be normal. You spoke to her yesterday." Hannah gave him a look. "With permission from your father." She almost smiled. They sat side by side. For several minutes neither spoke. Julian folded his hands. "I closed 2 routes." Hannah turned toward him. "What routes?" "The ones moving narcotics through Harbor Crown." She studied his face. "Temporarily, permanently." "What did Raymond say?" "He said my father would call it weakness." "And what did you say?" "That my father is dead." The words carried no cruelty. "Only release." Julian continued. "I ordered an audit of every legitimate account. Peter gave investigators access to Santoro's records. In exchange, he will testify about the office attack. You are letting him live." "Yes. That cannot be popular." "No." "Why did you do it?" "Because killing him would protect my anger." "His testimony protects the people he endangered." Hannah looked down at her hands. "That sounds like a different choice." "It is one." The operating room doors opened. Dr. Porter entered the waiting room and removed her surgical cap. Hannah stood. The procedure had gone well. Walter's heart was stable. His recovery would be difficult, but he had survived. Hannah covered her mouth. Julian rose beside her. The relief broke through everything she had been holding back. She turned and pressed her face against his chest. His arms came around her carefully. Not trapping, waiting. When she held him tighter, he did the same. 2 weeks after the warehouse, Hannah returned to Harbor Crown for one meeting. The 46th floor had been repaired. New glass covered the windows. The blood-stained carpet had been removed. The broken doors had been replaced with reinforced wood. Her desk remained exactly as she had left it. The cracked monitor had been replaced, but the old desk still carried the coffee stains and scratches from her first day. Julian waited inside his office. Raymond sat near the window. Mason stood by the door. A contract rested on the desk. Hannah did not sit. "What is this?" Julian pushed the papers toward her. "Chief Operating Officer." She read the first page. The salary was more than she had imagined earning in years. The contract included authority over Harbor Crown's legal operations, compliance staffing, and commercial shipping. "This is not an assistant position." "No, I have never been a chief operating officer. You rebuilt my company in 1 month while half the people in this building tried to prevent you from understanding it." Raymond watched her. Hannah closed the contract. "I am not signing this." Julian's face revealed nothing. Raymond looked almost satisfied. Hannah opened her folder and placed another document on the desk. "I wrote my own terms." Julian read the first page. Harbor Crown would no longer transport narcotics. Civilian weapons contracts would be terminated. Every legitimate account would be reviewed by independent auditors. Employees could resign without threats, surveillance, or forced confidentiality beyond lawful business protections. The legal shipping company would be separated from criminal assets. A compliance department would report directly to Hannah. The Cardiac Assistance Foundation would receive only verified legal revenue. The final page granted Hannah full authority over operations hiring and financial controls. Raymond gave a quiet laugh. "You expect us to surrender the company to you?" "No, I expect the company to survive without depending on crime. You have known this family for 6 weeks. I knew your books for 3. Raymond's smile disappeared. Hannah looked at Julian. "If I return, I do not become decoration beside your name." "You would not. I do not ask permission to do the job. You will have authority. I do not stay quiet when I believe you are wrong. I have accepted that silence is unlikely." She ignored the remark. "And no decision involving my safety is made without me." Julian read the final line again. Then he signed. Hannah stared at him. "You did not negotiate. I have learned not to waste time arguing when you are right." Raymond rose. "This is not only your decision." Julian looked at his uncle. "It is my company. It is the family's foundation. The family nearly lost it because men trusted tradition more than records." Raymond's expression hardened. "You would choose her over blood?" Julian stood. "No." His voice remained calm. "I am choosing a future over a grave." Raymond looked between them. Then he picked up the contract and read Hannah's conditions. "You remove narcotics and 3 crews lose their income. They can work legal freight." Hannah said. "They will refuse. Then they can leave. They are not office employees. No, they are grown men who have spent years telling themselves crime was the only work available." Raymond looked at Julian. "She speaks as if changing men is simple." Hannah answered before Julian could. "I do not need to change them. I need to change what Harbor Crown pays them to do." Raymond remained silent. Then he placed the contract back on the desk. 1 year, he said. "If legal revenue falls, the family reviews the arrangement." 6 months, Hannah said. Raymond's eyebrows lifted. "If I cannot show measurable improvement in 6 months, I do not deserve the role." Julian looked at her. "You do not need to prove anything." "I know." She held Raymond's gaze. "He does." Raymond extended his hand. Hannah shook it. Her first week as chief operating officer began with resistance. 3 managers refused to provide financial records. 2 captains stopped attending operations meetings. 1 man named Anthony Caruso laughed when Hannah asked for fuel invoices. She was answering phones last month. The meeting room fell silent. Hannah placed a folder in front of him. "And you have been stealing fuel payments for 6 years." Anthony's smile vanished. She displayed records from 4 shell vendors, all registered to relatives using the same residential address. Every month, Harbor Crown paid for thousands of gallons that never reached a truck. Anthony looked at Julian. "You are letting her accuse me." Julian sat at the far end of the table. "No." He looked at Hannah. "I am listening while she proves it." Hannah slid the final page toward Anthony. "You can repay the money and resign from legal operations, or the auditors can send this to federal investigators." Anthony rose. "You do not threaten me." Hannah remained seated. "I gave you options." He turned to Julian. "This is what we are." Now, Julian's expression did not change. This is what accountability sounds like when you are not holding the gun. Anthony left. No one else refused to provide records. The work was not clean. Closing the narcotics routes angered crews who had earned more from illegal cargo than legitimate freight. Some left. Others threatened to join smaller organizations. Julian met each threat with discipline. He refused to reopen the routes. Harbor Crown shifted toward medical equipment, construction materials, and regional freight contracts. Hannah negotiated with unions, insurance companies, and port authorities. She worked 12-hour days. Julian worked beside her. They argued constantly. He wanted more security. She wanted fewer men frightening employees. He wanted decisions made quickly. She wanted them documented. He wanted to remove anyone connected to Peter Lang. She insisted guilt required evidence. Their disagreements became known throughout the executive floor. So did the way Julian listened when Hannah finished speaking. One evening, Raymond entered the conference room while they were arguing over a new port contract. "The labor cost is too high," Julian said. "The labor cost is legal. We can negotiate lower. We can negotiate fair. You are asking me to pay 30% more. I am asking you to stop building profit on people being afraid to complain." Julian leaned back. "You enjoy making every conversation difficult." "No, you arrive difficult. I make it useful." Raymond cleared his throat. They looked toward him. He placed a report on the table. Legal revenue had increased by 12%. Insurance exposure had fallen. 3 former Santoro clients had signed with Harbor Crown because the company now passed independent review. Raymond looked at Hannah. 6 months may have been generous. "Are you admitting I was right?" "I am admitting the numbers are irritating." Julian smiled. It was the first time Raymond had addressed Hannah without suspicion. Nico returned to work with limited movement in his shoulder. Hannah tried to place him in administrative security. He refused. "I am not sitting behind a desk. You almost died in front of one. That is why I prefer doors." She arranged physical therapy and reduced his field hours. He complained every week. He attended every appointment. Diane became Hannah's executive coordinator. On her first day in the new role, she entered Hannah's office carrying a stack of forms. "I thought you would hire someone younger. I hired someone who survived 11 assistants and never lost the keys." Diane smiled. "I knew where all the bodies were buried." Hannah looked up. Diane froze, metaphorically. "I hope so." Walter recovered slowly. He complained about rehabilitation hospital food and the way every nurse treated him like glass. Hannah visited each evening. Julian came twice a week. At first, Walter asked him questions about legal shipping, then baseball, then Hannah. One evening, Hannah arrived and found them playing cards. Walter pointed at Julian. "He cheats." Julian placed another card down. "I win." "That is not a denial." Hannah sat beside them. "What are you playing?" "Something he claims is poker." Julian looked at her. "Your father does not respect strategy." Walter collected the cards. "Your boyfriend does not respect rules." The room went silent. Hannah looked at Walter. "My what?" Walter shrugged. "I have a weak heart." I do not have time for slow people. Julian lowered his eyes to hide a smile. Hannah turned toward him. Do not encourage him. I did not say anything. That has never stopped you from being responsible. Walter laughed until the monitor near his bed changed rhythm. Hannah immediately stood. He waved her back. I am fine. Julian watched her. You still think everything is your responsibility? She looked at him. I am improving. So am I. The Walter Reed Cardiac Assistance Center opened 8 months after the warehouse. The program occupied 2 floors inside St. Catherine. It helped working families pay for transportation, medication, home care, and rehabilitation after cardiac surgery. Every dollar came from Harbor Crown's audited legal revenue. Hannah insisted the accounts be published publicly. Julian agreed. At the opening ceremony, Walter stood beside the plaque with a cane in one hand and disbelief on his face. You named it after me. You complained when I tried to pay your bills. So you built an entire foundation. You raised an unreasonable daughter. Walter looked across the room at Julian. No, I raised her mother's daughter. His voice softened. She would have liked this. Hannah looked down. Julian moved beside her. He did not touch her until she reached for his hand. Reporters photographed them together. For years, Julian had avoided public images that revealed personal attachment. This time, he remained beside her. The photograph appeared in the Baltimore papers the next morning. Julian Moretti and Hannah Reed stood beneath the foundation plaque with Walter between them. No one mistook Hannah for an assistant. The 46th floor looked different by the end of the year. Employees no longer lowered their voices when Julian passed. The files were organized. The calendars matched. The security guards wore visible badges. The frosted doors remained, but they were no longer locked during business hours. Outside the executive offices, a new plaque had replaced the old one. Julian Moretti, Chief Executive Officer. Hannah Reed, Chief Operating Officer. Hannah kept the cracked desk. Julian ordered a custom replacement made from Italian walnut. She returned it before it reached the elevator. He entered her office holding the delivery invoice. You sent back a $12,000 desk. Yes. It was designed for this room. This room already has a desk. He looked at the scratched wood. One drawer does not close. It closes if you lift it first. The surface is damaged. So am I. Julian's expression changed. Hannah ran her fingers across an old coffee stain. This is where everyone expected me to fail. And you enjoy proving people wrong. I enjoy remembering that they were. He placed the invoice on the desk. You could have kept both. That would make the room crowded. It is a large room. You are a large presence. Are you calling me difficult? I would never repeat myself unnecessarily. He leaned across the desk and kissed her. Months earlier, his kisses had carried urgency, as if time could be taken from them without warning. This one was patient. He had learned patience in pieces. In conversations he did not control. In decisions he shared. In the space he gave Hannah when fear told him to pull her closer. One evening in early spring, Hannah returned from a meeting and found Julian waiting beside the cracked desk. The office lights were low. Baltimore Harbor glowed beyond the windows. A small velvet box rested beside a familiar stack of papers. Hannah picked them up. It was the first schedule she had corrected for him. The pages still contained her handwritten note about his mother's birthday. You saved this. You insulted me in writing. It was constructive criticism. It was the first honest thing anyone had said to me in years. She placed the schedule down. Julian opened the box. A ring caught the light. He did not kneel immediately. First he faced her. I cannot promise you a life without danger. Hannah's breath caught. I cannot erase what I have done. I cannot make every man who hates my name disappear. That sounds less romantic than the usual speech. I warned you. She smiled. Julian continued. but I can promise that no decision about your life will ever be made without you again." He lowered himself onto one knee. "Hannah Reed, will you continue reorganizing everything I thought could never change?" She looked at the ring, then at him. "That is a terrible proposal." His face fell slightly. She let him suffer for 1 second. "My answer is yes." Julian stood and pulled her toward him. Hannah laughed against his mouth. When he placed the ring on her finger, his hands were steady. The wedding took place in May inside a restored waterfront warehouse overlooking Baltimore Harbor. Hannah chose the location. Julian objected. "You were kidnapped in a warehouse. Not this warehouse. That distinction is not comforting. It has windows. That is your argument. And heat." He agreed. Walter walked Hannah down the aisle. His steps were slow, but he refused the cane until they reached the front row. Mason stood beside Julian. Nico raised a glass with the arm Hannah had saved. Diane cried before the ceremony began and denied it afterward. Raymond arrived early. Before the guests entered, he placed a chair beside Julian's at the long family table. Hannah noticed. "That seat used to belong to your brother," she said. Raymond looked at the chair. "Yes. You do not have to give it to me. I am not giving it away." He met her eyes. "I am recognizing who earned it." For the first time, Hannah saw grief beneath his discipline. She touched his arm. "Thank you." During the reception, Diane stood near the bar with a new employee from Harbor Crown. The young woman watched Julian allow Hannah to straighten his tie while she reminded him about the order of speeches. He really went through 11 assistants before her. Diane nodded. The first left before lunch. Were they all afraid of him? Everyone was afraid of him. And Hannah was not. Diane looked across the room. Julian bent toward Hannah as she spoke. He listened without interrupting. "Oh, she was afraid." The employee frowned. "Then why did she stay?" Diane smiled. She never confused fear with surrender. Near midnight, Hannah and Julian returned to the Harbor Crown offices. She was still wearing her wedding dress. Julian carried her shoes in one hand. "You have an unhealthy attachment to this building," he said. "I forgot something. On our wedding night, it is important." She entered her office and sat at the cracked desk. From the bottom drawer, she removed the unfinished resignation letter left by one of the previous assistants. "Mr. Moretti, no amount of money is worth being treated this way." Hannah turned the page over. She picked up a pen. "Some things are worth staying for, but only after you change the terms." Julian appeared in the doorway. "You are working. Your schedule was wrong." "Of course it was." She closed the drawer and stood. Julian held out his hand. Hannah crossed the office and took it. The city lights moved across the windows as they walked away together. The camera remained on the old desk, scarred, overlooked, still standing, just like the woman who changed everything.